What's up, guys? So, I'm here to talk about if sports dogs should be accepted as they are by police departments, as well as should police dogs be allowed to do sports tournaments, competitions, shows, whatever, on downtime. With it said, let's watch this video. Because of time, I'm not going to play it through. I'm going to kind of just address it as we go. So from the get-go, this right here is a sports trainer, a sports dog. He is training for some kind of IPG or whatever. I'm not a sports guy. I don't know anything other than the training is flawed. But as far as what each category, whatever division, whatever they call it, is, I don't know. So that I'm not going to address. What I am going to address is the techniques, because I'm a technical guy, because I trained with dogs. The dogs these guys pretend to be training. So with that right there, this is a sports dog, and you can tell it's a sports dog because he's having to point the dog in the direction towards the target that he wants the dog to engage. Now, in the police world, sometimes you would have to point your dog, but it shouldn't be a necessary thing that you do or have to do. The dog should know who the target is, no matter what. The reason that the dog doesn't know what the target is because of poor training or poor understanding or situational awareness, things like that, that either are something from training, something from the handler, or something from the dog's toolbox that has flaws in it. Now, with the pointing, the reason you don't want to do it in law enforcement, especially if you're on a technical team, is how do you hold a gun and point the dog, especially if you're holding the dog by the leash with the opposite hand. You can't hold the leash, point the dog, and hold the gun at the same time, especially if you have a assault or a carbine type weapon. So he sends the dog goes out. That right there is a big reason why sports dogs should not come into police work, is because in the sports world, the dog just goes for whatever. Usually, as you've seen right there, for whatever's offered to the dog. It doesn't target or engage a specific area. For instance, it doesn't engage the necessary weapon side, strong arm, the dominant hand that is holding the weapon, and it doesn't engage close to the weapon. It doesn't engage the rest of the right side. That is one thing that doesn't translate into the police world. If it did that, then yes, I can maybe, make an exception later on depending on the rest of the training and standards in it. But that is the biggest one that keeps sports dogs from needing to go into police work. The second one, notice how that clouder stick is touching that dog. That is sports. You place that clouder stick with an axe that would be used by a subject in real war and police situations, law enforcement situations, then that dog would be dead. The fact that the sports dog doesn't recognize threats present or engage the threat's presence close to the threat, close to the weapon, by engaging the rest of the right hand, it doesn't translate into police work, because the dog would be dead if it did this in a environment where law enforcement operates and the subject has a weapon such as a machete, a knife, a sword, even a baseball bat. See, replace that clutter stick with one of those objects, an axe, a machete, a knife, a sword, a baseball bat, and you can see how that dog is dead. And another thing too I want to address right here, because it's a perfect still frame. Notice how the dog was hit. The dog didn't do what I call a transfer bite. It didn't move from that bite and hold, which means it's just grabbing the guy and hanging on, as you can see right there, to engage the arm that is the threat, that is carrying the weapon that is causing damage to it. That does not translate into the police community. That is one reason as well why sports dogs should not be looked at by law enforcement agencies, because in order to get a good dog from this type of dog, you have to break it down to the basics, and that's unnecessary training, unnecessary time. I mean, when a dog is trained for sports, by the time it's ready to really compete, it's about 2 years old. You already wasted 2 years old of the dog's life in training to mess it up, to have to retrain it. So do it right from the start, right? Another thing that doesn't translate well, the subject is able to control the situation. He is controlling that dog, making that dog go wherever he wants. And the police force, you want that dog to pull away from that guy while holding the guy, so that he's pulling the guy towards the ground. Right there, if that dog was really pulling, that dog would be, the subject would have to be walking towards the camera. One thing I want to point out, as you see, sports do have going for them is the recall, and I would address that later on, why the recall is a good thing that they do have. This right here, in law enforcement, you will never not be on the weapon side of that subject. That subject right now has the ability to reach out and grab your weapon on your side, because your weapon side is close to it. Now, I know this is training and this is just for show, and this, can't take into account all the real realities for the situation that could happen, the what ifs. But you should try. You should try to train as well as possible. In this case, be on the other side. The weapon that this subject is still holding should not be there, because what it does is teaches the dog that it's no longer a weapon, that it's never been a weapon. As you seen earlier, the dog was getting hit by it. It takes the dog's threats and understanding the threats away. It teaches the dog that it's just a toy, that it's just a game, that it's just there to be there, that it has no significance. When you do this is called an escort. When you do an escort, you want to be, like I said, you want to be on that strong weapon side, and where you want the dog at, because you never want the subject between you and your dog. You want the dog to be behind the subject, and if you pull away from the subject, it allows that subject to have to turn to get to you and that dog, and by the time the subject turns to get to you, that dog's engaging. You don't want it that close, the dog that close to that subject, because the dog can potentially accidentally bite you, and it causes you to have to look around the dog to get to the subject, to control the subject. Again, the pointing, you should not point, especially that dramatic. I mean, look how far out he has. If he has to come back to reach for his weapon, or to reach for his radio to call for backup or whatever, he has to take time to make that movement. Another thing too on this, yes, in law enforcement you will send your dog out like this, but what they don't teach in sporting world is that you are a team. If you send your dog out, you do not stand at the back and wait for your dog to do the thing and you call it back on the recall. No, you go and you try to make contact with the subject so you can apprehend it. So as soon as that dog goes out, you should be moving. Now that's a pretty cool